Welcome to Career Pivots, formerly the Career Hour. We've graduated from a pilot program through the summer into a regular time slot. This year renamed our show Career Pivots. Tonight we've got two terrific guests to discuss pivoting to entrepreneurship and along the way kind of creating one's personal brand and perhaps addressing some of the challenges they had as they pivoted from one position to another. Before we get going, a couple technical details. The show is being recorded. Eventually there'll be a link up to it if you miss some of it or have to drop out to help a child doing virtual homework or something like that. And after I do kind of interview our two guests, we will take questions, and you can type your question into the chat function, and we can, our co-producers, helpers, Kate will unmute you so you can ask your question in person of our guests or me. The show will be an hour. We may stay on a bit longer for some final questions this evening. I want to call out a reminder to register for Cross Campus, the fabulous new resource connecting Yale alumni with Yale students and other alumni. And we have two people I want to introduce first, both from the Board of Governors, Randy Helm, Yale 70, Ben Bartolome, Yale 16. And they will be the co-producers of this year's Career Pivots. And I'm going to let each of them tell you a little bit about themselves. Randy?
Sure. Hi, I'm Randy Helm, class of 70, and one of the co-producers, as Sam said. We're going to be interviewing guests on this program for many kinds of career pivots during the coming year. People starting their own businesses, people changing professions, some re-entering the workforce after time away, even to thinking about, is this the right time to retire, and how do I succeed at retirement? So I'm hoping that if any of those topics are of interest to you, you'll tune in. But the other thing is, you might have other ideas for topics that you would like us to address. And so if you do, just let us know. Just put it in the chat or send an email. So I'll just turn it over to my colleague, Ben, and we'll take it from there.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Ben Bartolome, Trumbull College, class of 2016, and first year on the Board of Governors. Really excited to be working on this series with Randy and Sam, and we really hope that you're able to gain some valuable career insights from our panel starting today and over the coming months. Just to emphasize what Randy said, we really appreciate any feedback you guys have, so don't hesitate to reach out. And yeah, pass it back to Sam and we'll get it started. Enjoy.
Well, thank you, Randy, and Ben in particular for donating all the time. A lot of work goes into this. Kate Gustafson is behind the scenes helping us all out. And I want to give a call out to Wendy Maldonado D'Amico, who shepherded us through the pilot period. And of course, we've got Steve Bloom on board here. I can see him on screen. And he was really the progenitor of Cross Campus, which is dramatically increasing in members and people who are using it effectively. So tonight we have two Yaleys with us. Michael Lewittes is here. And Aaron Shipp. Aaron's also on the Board of Governors. We've got a good presentation here from the Board of Governors tonight. I'm going to kind of go alphabetically here, so by last name. So I'm going to start with Michael. And I know you've kind of pivoted a number of times, so it would be great if you'd be willing to kind of take us through your career journey, focusing on some of the pivots you've made, especially toward the entrepreneurial world, and some of the challenges you faced along the way.
Well, thank you very much, Sam, and thank you everyone for being here this evening and for allowing me to discuss really one of my absolute favorite subjects, me, about professional pivoting. And I got to tell you, when I graduated from Yale, I left Yale and I said, I'm going to become a comedy writer and I'm going to move back to New York. And I wanted to write for a sitcom, but the problem was they didn't have sitcoms in New York, and they really still don't. But there was, I graduated in '89, and in 1990, there was one sitcom, and it was supposed to star Dr. Ruth. And it was shot for ABC. And at the old days, they would air a pilot, and if people gravitated to it, they would continue that series. But the show aired, and it was terrible. It was not funny, which is my understanding a prerequisite for comedy. But Dr. Ruth liked me. She had seen my writing samples. We met, and she liked me, and she said that she had a lot of other things in the works, and whether I would be interested in working on maybe one of her other shows that she was working on at the time. And I said, absolutely. And she said, I said, would you be willing to work? And I said, I'm willing to do anything, which, by the way, is not something you say to a sex therapist, I realized over the years. But she liked my attitude, and she hired me. And she hired me to work on a TV show that was on Lifetime Cable. It was called You're on the Air with Dr. Ruth. And basically, it was an advice show. But TV being TV, got canceled after a while, and I needed a job. So I went into public relations, and I'll be brief about this. So I went to public relations, and it wasn't what I had set out to do. It was a good job. I was doing well at it, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And so one day, a gossip columnist from New York Newsday, a woman by the name of Linda Stacy, said to me, she said, I'm looking for gossip columnists to help me. I'm moving to New York, the New York Daily News. I'm going to need 2 assistants. You work in PR. You deal with editors and writers all the time. Who do you think I should hire? And I said, me. I thought this was just a great opportunity for me. And she said, well, but you're really a publicist. I said, no. I'm a writer. I'm doing this publicity job right now, but I have a ton of contacts. You know that I feed you gossip stories all the time. And so I was in the running for it. And every day, my clients, by the way, were nightclubs. Celebrities went to nightclubs. So every night I went out, I would come back with gossip stories, and I sent them to this woman, Linda Stacy. And finally, she said, you know what? You sent me more gossip items than anyone else. You've been very persistent in a good way. The stories you are sending me are funny. You're hired.
Wow.
So that was really, a major change in my trajectory completely. And it was a great pivot. And and then she hired another guy named AJ Benza. We were the 2 younger reporters. And then about a year later, Linda decided she didn't want to do gossip anymore, and that she wanted to do more opinion and editorial pieces. And the paper was fine with that. And shockingly, they decided that me and AJ were going to be the 2 gossip columnists for the Daily News we had about 1 million readers a day at the time, which I couldn't believe it. And then contemporaneously, we were getting sort of well-known. We ended up being on the cover of New York Magazine. And then we were both hired to keep our day jobs at the Daily News, but also to be correspondents for E! So we were correspondents on a daily show called The Gossip Show. And I was 23, 24, everything was great. I couldn't believe it. And I probably would have kept that job forever. But then one day we had a new editor-in-chief, and he called me and AJ, and AJ and I had been writing the column for about 5 years. And my editor-in-chief, he said something to me that day he said something to me, and I thought to myself, I can never work here again. He said, Michael, AJ, you're fired.
Jeez.
Unexpected pivot. And what I want to stress actually to the Yaleys out here is that, many of us, we've excelled for most of our lives. We work hard, but sometimes you might get fired, and it has nothing to do with competency. It might have to do with budget cuts. In newspapers and in print, what often happened was the new editor-in-chief came in, brought his or her team, the red team was in, and the blue team was out en masse. And probably about 2 months later, I had that reverse situation where the legendary Cosmopolitan editor, Helen Gurley Brown, was retiring. And I was part of a new team of young editorial writers and reporters who were then brought to Cosmo, and we replaced Helen Gurley Brown's old regime. Now, another unexpected pivot. If you asked me when I was charting out my career, would I be working as the articles editor at a women's magazine, that probably would have been not even in my thoughts. But that was really, in many ways, a fantastic opportunity for me working at Cosmo. And I learned a lot there. And I'm not talking about just learning about, what my shoes say about me, but, those type of Cosmo articles. But what I learned was, first of all, I had been a reporter. Now I was an editor. So that's a whole different skill set. People may think it's very similar, but it's very different. And I was now a manager of a lot of writers and contributors. And Cosmopolitan was, and it still may be, the largest magazine in the world with dozens and dozens of different languages that is published in. And so everything was very magnified, but it was also a fantastic learning experience because it was a female-led company. I was in the minority this time. But I think the biggest lesson, and I'm going to move a little faster about the other things I've done, I think the biggest lesson that I learned was when we went to Cosmo, the new team, there was a downward trend in the sales. And we worked late every night. I mean, really late, middle of the night. We turned it around. And after the first year, our sales went up about 20%. We were winning. And there's no better lesson when you're working than doing something and doing it well and winning. And that's really powered me throughout my entire career. I work almost every Sunday now. I work still well into the early hours every night, because when you taste success, there's really nothing else that's palatable other than that. Palatable. You just want more success. So I'll take you quickly. My next thing was I went to Us Weekly magazine. Now, Us Weekly magazine wasn't the magazine that it is today. It really was rather unknown. And that was kind of the challenge for me. And what I learned there was that everything is a pivot. We had no money. Our magazine had literally no money. We were up against People magazine, which, just to put it in perspective, they paid $14 million one day for one photo of Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. We had a budget of, for the whole year, maybe a few $100,000, which we had to conserve.
Wow.
So we made lemons, we made lemonade out of lemons. We had this de minimis budget, and while People magazine was buying all these beautiful, glamorous photos of celebrities, we started buying these really cheap photos of stars pumping gas and throwing out their garbage. And we repackaged that. We pivoted, we repackaged that, and we took these decidedly unglamorous photos, and we made a section that ended up getting larger and larger. We called the section Stars Are Just Like Us. And that's now really part of the celebrity lexicon, the stars are just like us. And I would argue that our pivot actually changed the way that entertainment reporting is now. If you want a photo of a celebrity on a red carpet, it'll cost you pennies. But if you want a picture of a celebrity pushing their groceries and carrying their kids and all this very non-movie star stuff, that will cost you a fortune.
Fascinating. Now, there came a point where were you at NBC then?
Right. Then I went to NBC right after that to produce Access Hollywood because I wanted, again, I saw print dying. I saw the internet emerging, but it's still, Us Weekly still doesn't own the name usweekly.com. So I saw the internet, but we didn't know what was going to happen. But I knew television. I knew television was still better than being in print at that point. So I went to Access Hollywood. And that really was what changed my life in many ways, because it's where I decided I wanted to run a company, and also where I had my first interactions with venture capitalists, which is now what I'm doing. Now I'm doing venture cap.
Mm-hmm. But you made a very entrepreneurial move in terms of Gossip Cop. So
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that and the challenge of moving from NBC, how you got that out of NBC and into your own company.
So what happened was, when I was at NBC, what I noticed was that about 25 to 30% of what we were reading on blogs and seeing in newspapers was either untrue or unverifiable. And generally the stuff that was untrue spread like fire on the internet, which was the Wild West at the time. And NBC really liked me at that point. I had been producing some primetime specials. I was their golden child at that moment. And they said, do you have any ideas for digital properties? And I said, the truth is, yes, I do. I keep seeing all this stuff, which now we all call fake news. I said, we keep seeing all this stuff which is unverifiable or untrue, and it's spreading on the internet. We can't air it on TV because it's wrong, but I think maybe we can repackage this. And I told them the truth. I said, I bought this domain. It's called Gossip Cop. I've trademarked the name. I'd like to build it out. Can we talk about doing a rev share? And they said, you know, you've been great. We love you. Yeah, let's talk about a rev share. And about 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, I get a phone call from general counsel. And I said, okay, great. Legal signed off. Like, what do we do next? And he said, well, I want to tell you, I looked over your employment agreement, and I want to point out to you that under your employment agreement, anything that you create while you're here, we own. I said, wait a minute.
That's shocking.
Right.
Yeah, pretty common. Right, right.
So I said, so if I hadn't been honest and I quit, and then as I walked out of 30 Rock, suddenly came up with an idea that I called Gossip Cop, you wouldn't have even questioned that I spent 5 minutes in the building thinking about it? No. I said, well, this all doesn't seem fair. I said, well, what if I wrote a terribly embarrassing autobiography about myself? Would you want to own that? And they said, no, we wouldn't want to own that. I said, well, with that, now let's negotiate. And the truth is, at the end of the day, NBC ended up being extremely gracious. And when I say gracious, I mean they didn't ask for any equity. No, the truth is they were very, very gracious. They said it wouldn't be a good look for NBC Universal, a major conglomerate, to stop a guy who has the entrepreneurial dream of starting his own company. So, you know, we're going to let you go and do it. And I had actually tested it out on the NBC News website, and they went the extra step. To their credit, they removed all those stories from the cache. Now, you may think like, oh, that seems, you know, a little snippy. Why would they remove it? But actually, they were doing me a favor, because when I launched my company, things wouldn't have been directed. They wouldn't have gotten the credit for it. If someone was looking for Gossip Cop because they're a bigger organization, it probably would have gone to NBC first. So they
you pivoted, you launched Gossip Cop, yeah, and built it up, and now you've sold it, I gather.
I sold it a year ago, and you know, running your own business is all about pivots. There are good days, there are bad days. We got hit by a Google algorithm, which made me become singularly focused on learning everything about search engine optimization. And that's one thing I'd like to stress to everyone, which is you may be doing your job, but I think it behooves you to learn what some of the other people who work in your company do as well. That's not to say that you need to be better than them, but it's not a bad thing to be able to play every position. And so what happened was I ended up really learning SEO. And in fact, I became, frankly, an expert on it. And I have been invited by Google on numerous occasions to their offices to discuss the vulnerabilities that I found with the algorithm, the unreliable search results. And I've consulted with them for years. So, you know, but once I made those changes after I learned about SEO, the site took off. And a year ago, I sold the company to a private equity-backed media company. And that's when I decided, I think I want to go into venture.
So basically, your whole career story has been a series of pivots, really. And I think I want to move on and get Aaron in here, because I think we're going to see some similarities. Do you think, Aaron?
I think so, definitely. So, I mean, I think, you know, earlier, Michael, we were talking before the call, and you asked, you know, are we calling this pivots or divots? And I said, you know, for me, it seems more like career pirouettes. I think you were definitely pirouetting right there with me with your stories. So absolutely. I guess I'll begin talking about my career journey to start with a very important conversation that I had with my father when I was 30 years old, and I'm right in the midst of a career pirouette. To set the context, my father was a United Methodist minister, so a lot of the advice that he would give to me was definitely rooted in scripture. So on this particular day, we were driving through the neighborhood where I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina. He and I had just gone to lunch, and I was talking about, this career pivot that I was in, because I had definitely decided I was ready to leave acting. I had spent my 20s being a stage actor in New York City, studied English literature and theater studies at Yale, went right to work as an actor after graduation at the Williamstown Theater Festival. But, and bringing my mother in this conversation, she told me when I started being an actor, she was like, I just don't think that's going to fulfill you. Like, I don't think you're going to be able to do that for a living. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, Mom. And then 10 years later, fast forward, I had to like, Mom, you were right. But anyway, I was talking to my father about this, and he used this parable from the Bible. I think it was a story of the 10 talents. Talking about how different servants in a master's house were given a certain amount of talents. One had 10, one had 5, and one had 2, I believe. And he said, Aaron, you're the person in that story that got 10 talents. He said, you have so many gifts that you were given by the Creator. There is never going to be one career path that's going to fulfill you. So because of that, you have to figure out how to set your life up to be able to develop each one of those gifts that you've been given. And so why is that important to my life story? Because that changed my thinking. And therefore, pivoting as we're talking about it in this conversation did not become a scary thing for me. I now understood it as something that was going to be essential to finding fulfillment in my career trajectory. It was essential in freeing me from thinking that I had to follow some roadmap that had been laid out to me by peers, society, that you pick one thing and then you become the expert in one thing and you stick with that one thing for the next 30, 40 years. That just never made sense to me. And my father helped me understand why it did not make sense to me. So that's pretty much the context of which all my career pivots happened, because that transition time from leaving the world of acting was my first major pirouette. So what I did was, once I decided I was going to leave acting, I was in North Carolina and I started working, of all places, at a bank. And not just a bank, I worked in corporate and investment banking. So I was in super corporate America, all of a sudden, me, the actor.
That's a pirouette, definitely.
And it was a former theater person who also found her way in the door, was the one that hired me. So she knew that as an actor, there were definitely skills I could bring to this corporate universe. So again, a very serendipitous paths crossing with me and my manager. So when I was working in operations in Wachovia, I then started to learn about this thing called coaching. And I remember meeting a life coach at some point in time and saying, I think I want to do that one day. So how do I do it? So I started the journey of learning about coaching, and then went to a program called, I think the acronym is IPEC. I can't remember what it stands for, but it was one of the first coaching programs that was accredited by the International Coach Federation. So I started pursuing that education in 2006, somewhere in the mid-aughts, with the intention of pivoting to running my own coaching practice and having no idea what that even would look like and what that would be like. And I was very fortunate also at Wachovia to also have mentors that kind of taught me other things about business that I started to pull together that then served me for future career pivots. So I was very fortunate to have mentors that taught me about finance and numbers and how to think about a business plan and actually write a business plan and think about operations and those things. So I got a lot of valuable skills from my time that I spent working in operations and working at Wachovia Securities. And then 2008 hit and I saw the writing on the wall. I was like, if I'm a cog in the wheel here at Wachovia Securities and this doesn't make sense to me, I think it might be time to pivot out. So very much like Michael said, I saw the writing on the wall. I was like, I got to do something. So because I had already started this coach training, one of my fellow theater friends from Yale was working as an executive coach at this company in New York that specialized in corporate communications. So she was able to get me an interview with the company, and I was hired. And then boom, next year what happened, and all of a sudden I'm out in the world as an executive coach and consultant. And so I did that for a number of years, working specifically in the financial services industry and the high-tech industry. I spent lots of time in New York and Chicago and San Francisco, and you know, delivering all types of programs, working with C-suite executives on coaching them in terms of meeting their business goals, and sometimes, you know, where their personal and professional lives overlapped, coaching them through those challenges. And then that led to then taking that work and then launching my own practice called Get Your Life Ripped. And I specialized in, strangely enough, helping entrepreneurs launch their businesses, never knowing that I eventually was going to be my own client and launch my own business. So I had experience coaching people on launching businesses, right? You know, so I was living in New York and doing that for a while. And then I got very sick. I was diagnosed as being HIV positive in 2004, and learned that in 2014, 15, my medication that I was on had really started taking a toll on me. Just long and short, I almost died. Everything just, my life just fell apart and bottomed out because of this illness. And that caused me to leave New York, come back to North Carolina because I really needed to be around family for my healing and putting myself back together. But then, okay, I guess I got a pirouette again, because the same type of work that I was accustomed to having by virtue of where I lived in New York City and the relationships that I enjoyed weren't here in North Carolina. So what am I going to do? Well, again, you know, as fate would have it, you know, on the side, I had been doing this other work with this nonprofit that I had started called Why Apply. And Why Apply was a volunteer initiative that was born from myself and 3 other Yale alum. We partnered with the then Dean of Undergraduate Admissions, Jeff Brinzel, to create a pilot program to help really bright high school students in public schools in New York City at that time, but we've since gone nationally, with their applications to top tier colleges. So I had been doing that and partnering with Jeff Brinzel and the team and the Office of Undergraduate Admissions to really develop this program and really understand the world of college admissions, because I was working with the best. And so Why Apply grew, and I eventually became chair and president of the organization, and we expanded to, I think at one point it was 7 cities that we were in. Wow. So this was kind of what I called my side piece. That's how I always described, you know, Why Apply. Like, executive coaching was my main squeeze, Why Apply was my side piece. But then when I found myself back in North Carolina and kind of taking stock of where I was, you know, people had begun to know me as someone who was an expert in college admissions. So again, another serendipitous moment. I am actually flying out of Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina in 2016, and flying to Washington, D.C. to deliver a Why Apply program. When this is when we could all be on planes and be outside. Everybody remember that stuff? How fun all that was, you know? So I remember being at Reagan and getting my bags, and I was all tricked out in my Yale gear. I had the Yale cap on and the Yale tote bag I'd got for my 20-year reunion. And a young man came up to me and said, "Excuse me, sir, did you go to Yale?" And I'm like, "Well, yes, I did," you know. And he said, "I'm applying there as a transfer student." Yeah. And I said, "Well, you just happen to run into the right person, because guess what I specialize in?" Now, I've had these conversations before with students who were interested in Yale, and I've always given my business card, and, you know, 90% of them didn't follow up. This young man followed up before my Uber had even picked me up to take me to my hotel. So I was very impressed with that. And I was meeting my the members of the Why Apply team later on for dinner that night. And I was telling them about this encounter. And one of the people on the team, a gentleman by the name of Dave Ventresca, you know, who knew that I was kind of in this kind of, you know, in-between moment, of career pivots, or again, you going back to my, Protestant upbringing, where they say, when God closes the door, he opens the window, but it's hell in the hallway. So I was definitely in my hell in the hallway moment. And he said, well, why don't you just start your own company? He said, you've already worked as an executive coach. You have the training, you have the skills, you have the expertise, you have the network. You've been doing why apply for like 10 years now, or somewhere close to 10 years. He's like, why don't you just do that? Because it looks like you already have a client. And I was like, no, I'm not the one that starts companies. I coach people to help them start companies. I'm not, oh, wait, you know what? I really have yeah. It was almost like there was no other choice. I mean, there were choices, yes, but this was just the obvious, like neon light screaming, you got to do this. And my friends would tell you, launching the Ivy Edge is not what I wanted to do at all. I did it, kicking and screaming the entire time. And I approached the process like molasses running in January. I mean, it was just lugubrious because I fought it tooth and nail. That said, I launched it. And part of that is because coaching entrepreneurs, I knew the risk involved. As an executive coach, I had the benefit of being the talent. I didn't have to go procure the business, do all the back end stuff. I didn't have to do any of that stuff. I just got to, go out there and do my thing and let somebody else take care of that. So starting my business means that I would have to, as Michael said, kind of do everything. But I did. Best pivot of my life, because I would say right now I'm enjoying a level of success with the Ivy Edge I never thought I would enjoy, particularly with the pandemic hitting. A business has really increased because families that have the resources who want to take this thing off their plate, because higher education, as you know, Sam, is it's all in flux right now. So parents, so parents don't know what to do, but so they're looking for a trusted advisor who does know what to do, or at least has the bandwidth to go research and find out what the hell is going on, when they're not trying to manage kids and Zoom calls and all that good stuff. So it's been really great for me to be in the position to kind of take that on. But I also have learned in that I've always had the entrepreneurial spirit. I just didn't name it as such. When I was working as an actor, I was an entrepreneur then. I ran my acting career as a business. When I was starting as an executive coach, I ran it like a business. I ran it like an entrepreneur. I made the same types of risk that entrepreneurs have to make, where you could be flying high one day and then curled up in the fetal position in the corner crying the next, all usually from the same piece of news that you get, So yes, Sam, I see that you want to say something.
Well, so I'm picking up so many commonalities between your story and Michael's and my own pivoting out of the law firm and starting a venture-funded internet company. Many times waking up in a cold sweat at 3 a.m. and knowing what our burn rate was and how much cash we had, and like, oh my God, what are we going to do? We've got all these employees counting us, and so what are some of the challenges along the way, and the skill sets you brought that you feel were critical to pivoting into real entrepreneurship? Aaron, you want to go first?
Yes, flexibility of thought, I think, is the main thing. I think when I worked with adults that were challenged with how to make a career pivot because they were forced to, I think the biggest thing was having them acknowledge just, you have to expand your imagination in terms of what your life could be. You have to start thinking in more flexible terms and not be so calcified in terms of your thinking, in terms of what you can do, particularly people who are very accomplished. And as example of that, I remember coaching a client who was let go from being the CFO of some hedge fund. And he was thinking about making a career pivot to the nonprofit industry. And he was moving out to the West Coast. He was based in Connecticut. And so we were working together. And I remember he had his amazing education, like at the bottom of his resume, like Princeton undergrad, LSE for like business school, something else, PhD, just I think MIT, fabulous. But here it was at the bottom, like all demure, like an 8-point font. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you not screaming that at the top? Because in his thinking, that this was, the way that it was always done, and you weren't supposed to, like, put yourself out there and like blow your own horn. So it's supposed to be there. And I'm like, you got to rethink how you're thinking everything, because you're trying to launch into the news. So you got to scream what your skill set is, because how are the folks in the nonprofit industry going to know what you're bringing if you're not willing to flex to do what you need to do to get it done, I guess. So I think that's a really important thing. Yeah. Being able to be flexible in the moment and just kind of roll with the punches, and know that one punch, even though it may not knock you down, it doesn't keep you down.
And Michael, I think that probably resonates with you.
The phrase I used to use a lot was, it's not about getting knocked down, it's about getting back up.
Right.
And when you run a company, I mean, now that I'm in venture, I work with a lot of portfolio companies, and they're young, excited founders. They've been funded and they're ready to go. And, they've got their financial models and they think it's going to just slope straight up. And the thing I say to them is, you never know what's going to happen until the boat hits the beach and they're shooting you from all directions. You have no idea. And I got to tell you, things were swimmingly when I ran Gossip Cop. Everyone thought, what a great idea, fact-checking celebrity news, a complete flip of the model. But, we dealt with legal issues. We dealt with personnel issues. People didn't, sometimes I would think to myself, here I am, a grown man, and I have to be a camp counselor with these kids. You just don't know what's going to happen. Then you realize you get hit by the Google algorithm, or in my case, Dr. Phil. I hadn't even thought about this in about 10 years, but Dr. Phil decided he wanted to do a site like Gossip Cop, and he had a ton of money, and he and his son poured a ton of money into it, and it failed. Now, I think they approach it from a different place, but it was one of those things. I do remember it was a Friday afternoon, and I got tipped off by someone from Viacom that they were getting some information about him doing this. And I was thinking to myself, like, oh, now, I've got all these other things I have to deal with on a daily basis. How am I going to fight against them? And at the end of the day, it was really just focus. Just focus on what's ahead. Take care of the little fires here. Take care of the little fires here. And keep pushing along. You might fall down, but you got to get back up.
Yep. And I think another thing that jumps out is how you both embrace risk. So, when young people talk to me, or anybody for that matter, about, business and entrepreneurship, I talk about, you have to be realistic about becoming an entrepreneur. I mean, you have to be passionate about what you're doing. You have to be able to embrace the risk and not be risk adverse, because if you get anxious being risk adverse, get paralyzed, you're not going to be an entrepreneur. I mean, is that something that resonates with you, Aaron?
100%. 100%, and, I always couch that with, you have to know your level of risk aversion. You have to also know that it's a marathon, not a sprint. Yes. I look at the success that I've enjoyed this year, particularly with the Ivy Edge, and since its inception, it started, it didn't just start when I decided to file the LLC paperwork. I had been building this brand and this work, for decades. So if anyone, recently I was hired by NYU to teach, about the college application process this summer. And I'm getting all these kind of like kudos on LinkedIn about it. People are like, oh, that's really great, wonderful. And I'm like, for me, it's just a natural progression of what I've been doing for years. I'm just now at a place where it can be more public and get more public recognition from it, but I've been doing it for a long time. So I think that you have to understand it's a long-term game. So when you're assessing risk, you have to really assess it from, okay, what does year 1 look like? What does year 5 look like, or year 10? And where the imagination kicks in, so then you can work and plan backwards, because then you can manage risk. Because it's also about the management of risk. Because as Michael said, you launch when the boat hits the beach and they're shooting from all directions. Sometimes they're shooting from inside the boat.
Yes.
So I mean, so what do? When that happens? So you have to be in a space, a mindset to be ready for anything, to have that flexibility, be adaptive, rely on your intuition a little bit, rely on facts and data, and you just put one foot in front of the other. And one other thing I want to say to this point that I think is really critical, that's tied with risk. There's obviously and ultimately failure, and you can't be scared of failure. I have learned more from my failures than I've ever learned from my successes. And like Michael also said, Yale folk are not accustomed to failing. We're not. And we will run from opportunities in which we see failure as imminent. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you cannot do that. You must run towards that. Mm-hmm. It may sound counterintuitive. You must run towards it because you will learn, and you will learn how to get up faster and quicker when you're knocked down. You will learn who needs to be in that boat and who's not. Sometimes you will learn you have to knock that giant out before they get you first. And these are all part of the things that you learn as you're in this work, pursuing entrepreneurship.
Michael, you were.
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely what Aaron said. It's funny, I don't want to slag people, but I had some great producers, but in terms of being, team people, they weren't. And one of my big mistakes was I kept people who kept producing, but they were kind of infecting the rest of the staff. And so they were one of the people in the boat shooting at me. So that's a very good point. But the other thing I was thinking of, so I sold my company after 10 years and 2 days, which if the sale had gone the way it was supposed to, it would have been 9 years and 11 months. But we had to push another 30 days. And it afforded me the opportunity to do my yearly sort of post newsletter to the people who read the site. And what they didn't know, but I knew, this was my swan song. This was my farewell, my final newsletter. And as I thought long about it, this 10th time I've written this anniversary post, what dawned was that having a company is like having a child.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's not cheap. Let me tell you, it's not cheap. And you got to put the needs of the company ahead of yours. And, the company's going to crawl. It's going to stand up. It's going to fall down. It's going to make mistakes. You're going to love it, even with the mistakes. And then if you do it right, you'll be proud of it. And that was sort of my swan song that they had no idea. But I was really saying to everyone, this is my baby. My baby's grown up. I'm proud of what it's become. It was a lot of work, cost a lot of money, but we did it.
So good opportunity here. Let's open this up for questions. We've got quite a few people online. I know we've had some come in ahead of time. So anybody can post a question they may have in the chat. And Kate, I think we've had a couple in advance. So should we start out with those?
Yeah, that sounds great.
So we've had a questions come in from Michelle Pence, who was, I think, Yale 89. I'm scanning the scene. Michelle, are you on board here? I'm not seeing her right at the moment. But Michelle asked about, she had been in the tourism hospitality industry as COVID hit. And we all know what happened to that. And so she is properly out to thinking about a major networking campaign. And one of the common things we think, I think we've seen in Michael's story and Aaron's, is the importance of their contacts, their networks, as they pivoted from one career to another, and how often it was because of those contacts, kind of falling in from one to another. So Michelle specifically asked, so many people now, the people who are still working, they're frantic, they're at home, they're taking care of kids, parents, whatever. Can I actually do a networking campaign? And the answer to that is yes, and you have to. And, in a pandemic like this, whenever you have massive disruption, there's great opportunity. I think people are very willing to help. If you reach out and ask for some help, cross campus is a great way to start. LinkedIn, of course, to expand your network. It's great to start with fellow alumni because they're going to want to extend a hand out there. So I would say Michelle, yes, you've got to network to find a job in this COVID era. And one of the best ways to do it is start to reach out with alumni and so forth. We had a question come in from Samuel Schaefer, I think Yale 84, who was dealing with kind of some sort of a negative review. I'm not sure it was of Sam's work, but of something related to what he was doing. I think it falls into the area of online reputation management. And that is a very tough thing. I'll tell you one thing, a lot of the career PR people I've heard talk in this area say, you know, there's some big companies out there that advertise a lot, like, well, I won't specifically name them, but advertise they can push that link off your first page of Google or get rid of it altogether. And you know what? They can't, or it's very difficult. They can't get rid of it usually, and it's very challenging to push off. Michael, you want to comment on this? I think you've had some experience with the SEO world in this area.
Right. So you might temporarily knock it down, but SEO search is, there are about 300 factors to the algorithm, but one of them is the amount of links that are accrued. And so if it is a damaging story, unfortunately, those get more links than stories that praise people. It's just, unfortunately, that's the nature. So if it's something that is negative, people are going to pile on and link to it, and it's going to live there for a while. There are ways to, you know, I would suggest sometimes to people, maybe write for Patch or Thrive Global and write your own piece.
Yes.
About something. And that might get links.
Yeah.
You might be able, and you know, I'm not saying manipulate search, but you might be able to showcase what you do more than something negative that someone said about you.
Yeah.
Aaron, you agree with that?
I do, because it's kind of also with the networking question. It's about taking control of your own narrative. You know, you can't control. I mean, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, put yourself out there. You're going to break some eggs. You might make some enemies. You know, but if you can, as Michael's suggesting, start to maybe not counteract the narrative, but control your own narrative by pushing your own voice out there. In the long term, that helps in terms of building your brand, building your story. You tell the story that you want to tell. You know, so I definitely am in support of that. And what the other thing I want to add about the networking question is this. I don't think there's a better time to engage in networking, because look, most folks are home.
Yeah.
Everybody's home. So you have to go out meet for coffee or lunch. Like, look, Zoom link here, 30 minutes done. I mean, use it. Like if there's one thing to take away from this call, flexibility of thinking, this is mad opportunity for entrepreneurship right now. It's incredible, you know, for career pivots right now, because we're all learning to do something different. So while the energy is in flux, take advantage. Take advantage right now. Reach out to that classmate that you like what they're saying on Instagram, or you think there's some synergies. People have done it with me. I enjoy being a mentor now. I enjoy setting up these calls. When someone says, hey, recently, someone who's starting a college consulting company, we've been in contact. She emailed me, texted me this morning. Can we talk? After I get the applications, you know, can we do it after November 1st? Yes, absolutely. So she's doing it. So this is the time. You know, it's going to be really quick, simple. It's going to be beneficial for both of us, but now's the time. Strike when the iron's hot. Even if you're steady in a job and you feel you might want to move a year from now, find that time now, because it's about priming that network now for what might be a pivot or a pivot that's coming in the future. Because what COVID-19 has made clear to all of us is that none of it is certain.
Yes, well, boy, Aaron, you were on spot on your comment there. I mean, it really is. Who thought a global pandemic was coming? I mean, we started 2020 with an impeachment, and I think that seems like years ago.
Yeah, right.
You know, and then the global, 100-year event came along that has so changed life for all of us. And, I had occasion to drive through New York City the other day. Waze took me through New York City. And God, it was dystopian. I mean, it was very concerning to me. Michael, I think you're living in Manhattan, but I was shocked. I mean, it was like a neutron bomb had gone off or something, where the buildings were there, but where was the life of the city? And so I think all of us are experiencing this in different areas of the ways in which we work. How about some questions here? Do we have some questions for these two fellows who have donated their time tonight in the kind of pivoting to entrepreneurship arena?
I just want to add one thing to what Aaron said. This has awakened a lot of empathy for people. We're all in this together. And I feel like I do spend a few hours a day just helping people because I want to help people.
Yeah.
And I do have a lot more time in the sense that I'm not walking 20 minutes from this meeting to the next meeting. And, we're all we're not 9 to 6 or 9 to 7 anymore. We're kind of all here to help each other. But the other thing is that I find really kind of amazing about this is people who maybe you couldn't even get a meeting to have coffee in their conference room, they're literally inviting you into their home. You're in their home.
Yes, yes.
And you can do this every day.
Yes.
Like you're in their home, and I don't know if it's subconscious or not, but it brings you a lot.
Yes. A to the men, Michael. Yes, 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 yes. The energy is just so different, and that's why I always feel like I want to scream this. Especially us having the privilege of being a part of this network that we're a part of. You leverage it, use it, because as Michael was saying, like the intimacy, that this virtual environment brings because we're in our homes. I just relate a different way because I'm in my home as opposed to if I'm not. And so are the other people on the call, whether they're the mailman or the CEO. When you're at home, it's just a different energy you're bringing. So I think we're all discovering that. So yeah, I co-sign that 100%. Absolutely.
So we had another question from Nancy Upper, who I see on the screen here. If we can unmute Nancy, she can ask it herself. Kate, can we unmute Nancy there? Thank you. Whoops. Did we get Nancy unmuted?
Unmute.
Ah,
You hear
good.
me?
Yeah.
Okay. How do I see people, I'm sure Michael, Aaron, 500 plus people in your network. How did you do that one by one over a period of years? Because you can't really send all like you can on an email where you can attach 10 people to an email. So you just have to plug away and.
So how did you build your LinkedIn network to over 500 connections? Okay.
Correct. Because
Michael,
many employers, or as, for example, if you're publishing a book, your publisher says, oh, she's well connected, this is a good bet. So how do you build this? And some of them have plus after their names, which means they must have about 5 million.
Well, I mean, I don't know about this anymore, but when you had under 500, people could see very easily who those people were. So 500 at one point a few years ago was that magic number where if you didn't want people to know who everyone you're friendly with, like you wanted to get to 500. I'll tell you a very embarrassing thing right here. So when I was applying for getting into a co-op, I had about 400 and something, and I was like, I don't want them to know who all my friends are. So I sort of really went to get 500, and that way they couldn't see.
Well, how did you get 499?
Well, I guess jumping around from job to job. I had people from the Daily News. I had people from Us Weekly.
And you just go on and you click their name and you say connect.
And it also, you'll see, it will say you may know. And then you go, oh, you know what? I worked with this person back then.
Yeah.
Why not? Yeah.
Okay.
I would also add to that, after every professional interaction I had, whether it was intentional or whether it was just in passing, on my phone, right then and there, hey, let's link up. And it's immediate. And now, as someone who is a raging extrovert, that was easy for me to do because I was always out and about, particularly when I lived in New York City. But I would say going forward, even, among your network, as Michael was saying, like people you may know, but, even just with every interaction, just being intentional and asking, hey, can we link in? Most people, I've never had anyone say no. So if you make the ask, and then that just begets more people. And then over time, you have a viable network. And then when you are building that viable network, I think it's also important, again, to what Michael was saying earlier, put out content. Tell people what you're doing, what you're about. It doesn't have to
That's
be
a good
anything,
idea.
it doesn't have to be anything huge. And
Mhm.
content can be this article that I
Mhm.
like or resonate with me, or this particular pivot in my industry. You know, so you're starting to brand yourself as someone who's knowledgeable about a particular niche. So
That's a
you're not just
good-
getting the context, you're then being active about it. And I think that's a really important steps in terms of making that network vibrant and making it vibrant and work for you.
That's a good idea. I usually personalize the ask and say, we connect through Yale or through 58 Kappa or through
Yes,
Boston or
absolutely.
some such. And then I
Absolutely.
always send the thank you note. Thank you for connecting. I wish you
Yes,
career success.
absolutely. And there was a study done that showed, I can't remember it, but I'm a nerd, I remember lots of things, that it's actually the weak social connections that actually tend to be more valuable in our professional networking experience than the strong personal ones.
That's a good
Because it doesn't take much energy. But if I, for example, most folks in my network know that I'm a college expert. So if I hear from someone that I haven't heard from for 5 years, of course I'll take the call. Because it's not about, oh, how is your life? It's just a very simple business exchange. And we know who's experts in what, and then you move forward. So just that kind of checking in with that note, or just, hi, how are you doing? Or even just liking something, it keeps those weak connections going to where if and when comes time where you have to leverage them, you've already been doing it as just a part of your everyday being in the world as a professional.
And Nancy, also you can turn to YouTube and of course Google, but there's some great resources, and also on LinkedIn itself about how to grow your LinkedIn network. And I think some of them are very granular, like literally put down a list of every job you've had, every school you've gone to, every organization you've been a part of. Start listing the individuals within each, getting on LinkedIn. Alumni offices are very, very helpful at connections. We've got cross campus. I just posted a link to it again in the chat. So yeah, that's kind of the way to grow it, one at a time, and always offer the help back. Make it a two-way street, I would say.
That's good.
So we're coming close to our close. One of the things I've really noticed in my life about the challenge, and dealing with events that happen that make you have to pivot, is the difference in our internet world now. And I actually was thinking about Peter Salovey came down and talked to us at Yale right after the controversy around the Halloween party in Silliman and so forth. And somebody asked him a question. It was actually a classmate of mine who said, we were at Yale in the radical years when Bobby Seale was on trial, the National Guard was in New Haven. Kingman Brewster dealt with that set of issues. You're dealing with this. What are the main differences? And he said, it's time. He said, I got on a plane in San Francisco. Everything was fine at Yale. I'd been at a fundraising thing. I arrived in New York or wherever he arrived. I got off the plane and it was just inundated with this event that happened instantaneously. And I think that is so true of business these days for all of us, with the instantaneous nature of the internet, and how you can get an email saying Microsoft is entering the world to compete with you, or some other 800-pound gorilla, and suddenly your world is upside down, and you got your board members calling you, your investors calling you, your employees are saying, wow, should I get on LinkedIn? Should I be looking for a job? And so, the time compression is very challenging. Would you agree with that, Aaron and Michael?
Yes, I would. Yeah, I remember last year, March 12th, 2019, that's when Operation Varsity Blues hit. I was minding my business, eating some fried chicken for lunch. Next thing you know, my phone had blown up. So, and I had to put out a statement like in a matter of days for the nonprofit and the for-profit, because there was no choice. So yes, absolutely. You have to just, be paying attention, because it can all change just like that.
I'm sorry if this is a really silly and fatuous example, but we corrected the record for celebrities, and sometimes celebrities kind of maybe don't read everything other than the headline, or maybe they read it wrong. And we corrected something for this for the singer Miley Cyrus. She didn't read it right, and she said, what the heck are you guys doing spreading this false story? It was like, no. Actually, we corrected the story, but she had millions and millions of Twitter followers who just hated on us for, 24 hours. And CNN only read her side. They didn't even bother to click through to see what our story was. And they said, you know, here's a site that fact checks, and now Miley Cyrus is furious about it. I was like, whoa, whoa. I had to call someone at CNN. I said, didn't you guys even read the story? You know, you're basing it on a kid who just misread a tweet. Like, but, you know, again, I'm a grown man. You know, it was annoying, but, you know, millions of people. There were millions of people.
Yeah. Well, listen, we are at the end of our hour. I want to thank you, Michael, and you, Aaron, so much for being on board. Randy and Ben, thank you so much for coming on board and donating your time and co-producing this year. We are going to be back November 19th at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. It'll be Eastern Standard Time then. And we expect that the topic's going to be re-entering the workforce, which I know when I've spoken at a lot of Yale events is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. Many of us have stepped out of the day-to-day workforce for a variety of reasons, to deal with raise kids, to deal with health issues and so forth. So we look forward to seeing you on the 19th. And by all means, bring your questions and feel free to ask us. I put my email in. I'm on Yale's select list of external career coaches, you know, donate a lot of time to Yaleys asking questions and helping out. And again, a big thank you to Aaron, you and Michael, you, and Randy and Ben. And Kate, you make this all possible behind the scenes. Steve Bloom, Jeff, I see you there. And see you all soon, I hope, on November 19th.
Yeah, and just a quick plug. This particular show, as Sam said, will be the 19th. But we're doing these rolling every Thursday.
Yes, thank you.
So we're calling it Must See Yale. You're going to see plenty of other people. And we'll have the topics out. Kate will get the distribution out. Join us every Thursday. So we're going to be here every Thursday at 8 p.m. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Great show.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye, Aaron. Bye, Michael.